who was behind the Trump-Russia scandal, right? One of them was Soros, it appears, or at least his organizations. Other folks as well. I'll go into it. Now, Epoch Times reports this. It says, billionaire-backed operative kept funding Stíl and Fusion GPS in 2019. Christopher Stíl was the former British spy who authored that, collected the claims he made in it, which have been proven false or are totally unverified. Even the FBI never verified them. Even he never verified them. He collected that information from Russian sources, meaning that the document that was used to try to paint Trump as a Russian agent was itself a form of Russian disinformation. Never verified, fed to our government, fed to our media, and used by our intelligence agencies to spy on the president of the United States, Trump, at the time. And also Fusion GPS, the company that was part of that. And that was even after the dossier's credibility crumbled. They continued to finance that disinformation operation even after even after the document was exposed of what it was, which was disinformation. Epoch Times reports this. A former staffer of Senator Dianne Feinstein, the individual who had the driver who was a Chinese spy, you might remember, continued to pay large sums of money in 2019 to former British spy Christopher Stíl and Fusion GPS, the firm that retained Stíl for work on a Hillary Clinton-funded misinformation dossier, even as the credibility of both Stíl and the claims of his dossier evaporated. The Democracy Integrity Project, also called the TDIP, again, the Democracy Integrity Project, a nonprofit operation operated by former Feinstein staffer Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones, remember that name because he plays a few times into what we're going to go into. Daniel Jones, right, running the Democracy Integrity Project, and a former staffer of Dianne Feinstein, maybe alongside this driver she had who was a Chinese spy, paid $1.22 million in 2019 to a company called Bean LLC. Now, the shell company, Bean LLC, controls Fusion GPS, and $700,000 to Washingham Partners Ltd, a British company co-owned by Stíl, Christopher Stíl, the former British spy who did a lot of this, according to a tax filing. Jones continued to fund the firms despite revelations in 2018 and 2019 that severely undermined the credibility of the dossier and its author. Now, I won't go into debunking the dossier because we talked about that quite a bit, and I'm sure you folks have seen by now at least our articles debunking the dossier and how the whole thing fell to pieces and how it was really a disinformation campaign. Ironically, anybody who questioned it was criticized of pushing disinformation, right? It says here, continuing a bit further in the story, despite its hard-hitting report on news knowledge, because the New York Times actually exposed New Knowledge, which is an organization tied to this, tied to Jones, the New York Times actually was repeating some other disinformation. The New York Times fell for a Jones disinformation operation earlier this year. Jones was behind this possibly as well, publishing an article about the Epoch Times, the media I work for, sourced solely to Advance Democracy, Inc., another U.S. nonprofit operated by Jones that had also funded New Knowledge in 2018 and 2019. All right, it's all coming together, folks. The same folks attacking us tied to this organization, which New York Times was reporting on without actually verifying the information. New York Times spread disinformation against the Epoch Times, an information they never even verified, which was fed to them by Advance Democracy, tied to this organization run by this guy, Jones, who was the main figure behind financing the Stíl dossier and Fusion GPS as it went forward, right? Go into a bit more. Now, Jones used two of his nonprofits to pay New Knowledge $665,000 in those years, according to tax filings. The legal name for New Knowledge is Populi Inc. The company has since rebranded itself as Yonder. Kind of funny to keep changing names, huh? Now, in 2017 and 2018, Jones used his two nonprofits to to funnel more than $5.3 million to Fusion GPS, the organization that was running put out the Steele dossier, right? And almost $1 million to Stíl, that former British spy who did that. He told the FBI in March 2017, get this, that billionaire financer George Soros and a group of 7 to 10 Silicon Valley billionaires funded his Trump-Russia operation to the tune of $50 million. You hear that, folks? 7 to 10 Silicon Valley billionaires. We don't know who they were, but think about how many billionaires there are in Silicon Valley and which ones of them might have been involved in creating disinformation to go after Trump, while at the same time, different Silicon Valley platforms were censoring anybody who challenged these narratives, right? These individuals and George Soros, according to what he told the FBI in March 2017, were financing this operation with $50 million. He offered to give his findings to the Bureau, the FBI, and, quote, planned to share the information he obtained with policymakers and with the press. This is according to the Democracy Integrity Project. That's a quote from the document. Now, the Democracy Integrity Project, the other folks tied to this whole disinformation campaign, received $1.5 million from a subsidiary of Soros's Open Society Foundations. And so Soros playing a few roles in this, according to the foundation's website. Now, the project received $2 million from the Fund for a Better Future and also $500,000 from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And so, folks, if you have friends who still believe that Trump was a Russian asset, if you have friends who still believe that narrative, or they think that Trump colluded with Putin and was Putin's lapdog, whatever they were saying it was, they were lied to by an actual disinformation campaign that was being funded by the billionaires, right? Folks who claim that the billionaires are the enemy, funded by these billionaires pushing this campaign, which was a disinformation campaign, lying to the American people, pushing false information to our politicians, to our policymakers, to our intelligence agencies, and to our media, misleading this entire country during an election period, especially doing the same thing they criticized Trump of doing and criticized Russia of doing, which was, again, using Russian disinformation, because the Steele dossier was collected from Russian sources, which were never verified, using Russian disinformation to interfere in the 2016 elections. And at the same time, using that disinformation they created, these billionaires, including Soros, and 7 to 10 Silicon Valley billionaires, using that disinformation they created and the ongoing project from it, because they continued it, to continue targeting Trump with these false narratives.